is better. Give you guys a couple minutes to get back on. Thanks for the shout out in chat. Apparently, I had no audio because I was listening to music on the outdoor speaker out here, and the iPhone is not smart enough to detect, oh, you're doing a video, you're recording something. Maybe I should switch to the microphone on the phone to actually record the audio. But it didn't do that, and so I had to reboot the live chat real quick, or the live stream real quick, after I turned off the outdoor speaker. And so hopefully everybody can get back in here and we can get back into what I was talking about, and I'll start over. Fortunately, I was only like 3 minutes into the stream. There's been several times over the years where I'll be 15, 20 minutes into a monologue, and then I'll finally actually look down at the chat and people are like, your audio's not working, or it's really glitchy, or something like that. I'm like, man, this is why it's so hard to do everything yourself, because with no producer keeping an eye on this stuff, keeping an eye on chat, keeping an eye on the audio, keeping an eye on the live stream, even still being live, I basically gave up streaming live on Rumble, because the last 3 times I streamed live on Rumble, some kind of tech problem on their back end kept crashing the stream. And I'm not too conspiratorial about that. I don't think it was, uh-oh, he's talking about the Jews, or uh-oh, he's talking about segregation, shut it down. I don't think it was that. I think it was honestly a tech problem related to either my streaming software, OBS, or something with Rumble's back end. So I have not resolved that though, and so that's why I haven't been streaming live on Rumble. And now that we've actually accumulated more following on YouTube than on Rumble, by 50% almost, I might as well start doing lives on YouTube, you know? So that's going to be the strategy in terms of our live content for the time being. I will say, when it comes to doing lives versus sitting down and recording vlogs, whether it's in my car, my mobile office as I call it, or sitting in the home studio, I kind of like recording it and then editing it up just a little bit and then uploading it versus doing lives. It does require a lot more work. Like, the pipeline of content creation is just more laborious when you're having to put it through an editing studio, upload it afterward, upload it to 3 different social media platforms, Substack, Rumble, and YouTube. It is more work when you do that, as opposed to just hitting the live button and then the video is already uploaded as soon as the live is over. But in terms of being able to polish it up a little bit, frame it just right, all that kind of stuff. And honestly, when I have a topic that I want to reference my backlog, I have like 50 topics on my phone to cover in various vlogs whenever I have time to do so. Something about being in my car isolates me, and it filters all the external noise and the responsibilities of my life. So that's why you see probably 80 to 90% of my vlogs, not like sitting down and recording a documentary, but just talking about whatever I feel like talking about that day. They're usually from my car, because I'm also multitasking. I'm trying to get my daily gym trip in, trying to hit the grocery store and do all the other stuff you got to do to run life, instead of like sit down at the home studio and turn the lights on and get mic'd up and all that stuff. Lately, the workflow has been just do it from the car, man. Do it live from the car. And theoretically, I could stream live from the car too, just like I'm streaming here from my backyard. But I don't know. I feel like if I do that and I don't have control over the agenda and I'm looking at chats and stuff like that, that can pretty easily start bleeding into more than an hour's time. I don't know how long I'll be live today, but usually I'm trying to keep it at an hour for the vlogs or less, get into the gym, take care of my routine so I can get home, cook, get to bed at a reasonable hour, like 8 o'clock, something like that. So I was talking about this delicious Gatorade that I have over here, and that prompted me to start talking about the movie Idiocracy. So let me take a swig of this. I mentioned that I've already had 2 energy beverages today. I always start my morning out with like a Rockstar, a Monster, a C4, something like that. And that's my morning caffeine drip, just to get the day started. And then I always have some kind of highly caffeinated cocktail for my happy hour right before the gym, usually a pre-workout. And so I try not to have any more caffeine than that. Like, having 3 caffeinated beverages per day can kind of fuck with your circadian rhythm and actually being able to go to bed, fall asleep on time, stay asleep. And there's other biometrics that excessive caffeine can start to interfere with. So I try to keep it to 2 caffeinated beverages a day, which is where these not 0 calorie, but 5 calorie Gatorades come in. I just gotta have something to sip on all day. You know, I do my intermittent fasting thing, and so I don't get to eat any food. So my pleasure senses are not taken care of throughout the day. And so I gotta have something that tastes good, but the whole point is to avoid calories. So 0 calorie beverages, whether it's Crystal Light, the pre-workouts, the Monsters, the Rockstars, the Gatorades, sugar-free sweet tea, that's what I keep myself both hydrated and satiated with throughout the day until 6 p.m. That's when my intermittent fasting window closes every day, and I get to go hard on like a giant feast of usually about 2,500 calories. Man, this is hard to read in the sun. It says, Josh, look into what does that say? I can't read that. And then look into the Jewish egregora. I'm gonna have to look into that. So this one says, hey, blessings, thanks for the stream. Yeah, not a problem. Happy to hang out with you guys this Saturday afternoon. I had a couple hours to kill before my intermittent fasting window, and I was like, you know what? I was just gonna lay here in the pool and float kind of mindlessly, but I already did some mindless, and I don't mean mindless like turn on something to anesthetize you and sedate you like Netflix and movies and stuff, but earlier today, I went to the river that's near my house, and I read a couple chapters of Ted Kaczynski's Technological Slavery. I put a story about it in my Instagram. I'm working my way through that. I'm about 33% done. It's a 300-page book, and I'm about 115 pages into it. Very good reading so far. You know, there's a lot that Teddy was right about, and there's some other things that I disagree with. I talked about it in my last vlog, when he diagnoses the leftists, these people who have to collectivize in order to feel like they're part of a group, and that's a substitute activity, what he calls a surrogate activity, to achieve happiness and fulfillment, because they're not actually being fulfilled by what used to provide all of that for any individual. You know, 100 years ago, all of your happiness and fulfillment, for the most part, came from providing directly for your needs and your household and your children and your spouse. You know, you were tending to the field, and when you went inside, you had laundry to clean, and the house itself wasn't that great. You're always repairing it. You have animals to take care of. And so it used to be, I'm not even gonna say primitive life, but just pre-industrial revolution, you spent the majority of your time taking care of shit, including yourself, your home, and your family, and also engaging with your community. Post-industrial revolution, that's just not the case anymore. Like, we all probably spend 40 hours a week or less taking care of our Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You know, we gotta have food, water, shelter, love and emotional needs and that kind of stuff. But it's so easy to obtain those things these days that it only does take 40 hours or less per week. And so because people now have all of this time, like over 100 hours a week, where they've already locked down their basic needs in life, people are grasping at straws to figure out how to fulfill themselves. And that's what Ted calls surrogate activities, substitutes, you know, and it can involve a number of different things, whether they're hobbies, it could be traveling, whatever. But you'll find, though, with whatever hobby you pursue or whatever interest you pick up, it's never ending. And it only provides happiness for a certain period of time. Whatever, you know, you take up videography, cinematography, photography, or you take up, I mentioned in the vlog, basket weaving, or building stuff with Legos, or writing software, you know, whatever hobby you choose to take up. You see it all the time. People will start a hobby, they'll get super infatuated with it for a few months, it's fun and interesting, and then they'll just quit because it's no longer giving that dopamine spike of new, interesting, it's novel, and so they just jump to the next hobby. And whether it's hobby jumping or substituting some other kind of ongoing dopamine stream, which is typically mass media, people will watch entire seasons of television shows, they'll watch countless films, anything they can just put in front of their eyeballs to hopefully make them laugh or to feel an emotional connection. You know, you watch a romantic comedy and you have these thoughts of whimsy about how life could be if I met the perfect wife, perfect husband, what it would be like if I was a billionaire, what it would be like if I was an actor, you know, like all this other stupid shit that's just completely irrelevant to human life. This is what we've been fed as a substitute or a surrogate activity to keep us docile, distracted, and it's a big problem. This is why I talk frequently about having to constantly stay on top of inventorying your time, where you should just look at your ratio of hours per week that you have that's not sleep and that's not work, and figure out how much of that time am I spending on entertainment and leisure versus self-investment, whether it's your spiritual life, your physical health, or your mental health, or your economic safety. One of those things, that's what should be capturing the majority of your free time. And I know that's just not the case for most people. And I know I'm kind of like a fringe minority in that I have to be being productive. Like something about the way that I slowly matured my life. First, it was through the fitness life, which kind of introduced to me the principles of delayed gratification, self-discipline, self-denial. I found out that all of those character attributes actually are highly profitable towards anything you want to invest your attention in. If you want to pick up a side gig to help secure that future providence for your family, then it's going to require some discipline to stay focused on it, some humility to say, like, I'm not going to start out as an expert. If you're picking up the fitness life for the first time, I started out as a skinny, fat looking loser, and I had to humble myself and repent and say I was living this lethargic, slovenly, gluttonous life where I just thought whatever sounded good that day was what I was going to do. And exercise never sounded like a good and fun thing to do. And when it came to the decisions about my diet, it was always what sounds good to eat. And the crazy thing is I know, like, that's how the overwhelming majority, I mean 90+% of America, every meal they eat, it's what sounds good, right? It's always based on this is what sounds good to eat. And it's never what fuels me the best, what is protecting my longevity. If you're actually exercising, what is the protein content of this so that the exercise I did has dividends of turning that exercise into muscle. Like, there's just not much strategy behind the way people eat. It's not like you have to be neurotic about it and, you know, weigh every ingredient of the meal that you're eating on a food scale and use a calculator and all that stuff. You don't have to go that far necessarily. It really depends on how successful you want to be, but at least some intentionality with what you eat. It's not to say either, it's not the whole other opposite extreme of like, well, I guess that means I have to always eat broccoli, rice, and chicken, because that's what I read is like the most nutrient dense, muscle building, conservative on calories food. Like, yeah, if you're like trying to be literally 100% optimal, that's probably true. But there is something called diminishing returns, where you can have the same effect with a diet called If It Fits Your Macros, where you can eat any food you want. You can eat pancakes or brownies or pizza or bagels or chicken and broccoli and rice and all that stuff. But the whole thing is everything has to be in moderation and adherent to a calculated number. So you have to know how many calories per day you should be eating and how many grams of protein you should be eating. And everything else you can kind of Jenga in and out. You know, if you want more carbs or more fat, if you want to have a kind of unhealthy breakfast but make up for it with your lunch, dinner, or if you don't want to have breakfast and lunch at all and eat everything like I do at 6 o'clock at night so you get to enjoy this huge feast, those are all options. It's if it fits your macros, and intermittent fasting was kind of the formula that I figured out over 10 years that allows me to basically stay sub 10% body fat year round, maxed out my muscle capacity 5+ years ago. And it's really just living on easy street. Like I genuinely feel bad for people who haven't cracked the code on all this stuff yet, because they live their lives in perpetual envy. They see people who walk around staying lean, staying muscular and aesthetic, and they assume that somehow that person is luckier than they are, or that they are genetically gifted. And once again, that's just a matter of luck. And so that's why they seem to be able to eat more than me, and that's why they stay lean, and that's how they have so much muscle. It's like, no, it's not. Actually, none of that is true. And this is why I provide the full 10-year timeline in my book about achieving physical, spiritual, and mental mastery. I show the pictures of what I did look like, and I was not a genetic specimen. You can see that's like, this is just an average skinny fat guy. He's not athletic. Nobody would look at him and be like, well, that's an inspiring physique. I want to go do that. So it wasn't a genetic blessing, and it wasn't a background in athletics or anything like that that set me up for such an easy life when it comes to being able to eat mostly whatever I want and more of what I want as compared to people who aren't living the fitness lifestyle. It was intentionality and humility to say that I was doing it my way. That clearly was not working. I need to respect the advice of some other people who have walked this path and have the discipline to stay adherent to their recommendations for a prolonged period of time, not 3 days, not a week, not even a month, but you give it 3 months of actually following what I lay out in that book. It calibrates your diet and it prescribes the gym routine. And if you just stick to it, it is literally impossible to fail. Like, it's a math equation. And I'm not saying that theoretically. There is a math equation called the total daily energy expenditure, TDEE. And you put in your age, your gender, and your height, and it tells you how many calories you should be eating. And then you know how many calories you should be aiming for every day. And if you need to know how much protein you should have, you can just use the simple calculation of 1 gram per pound of body weight. So if you're a 150-pound guy, eat 150 grams of protein. And when it comes to carbs and fats, you can slot those in however you want, so long as you're never exceeding that total daily energy expenditure number. And this is all stuff that I just walk through. It's a 100-page book. It's on my website. And, you know, it was one of those things where I take it for granted knowing all those things, and I like to put information out there that improves people's lives. I used to live stream a lot about fitness. I had a whole side live stream called Red Pill Fitness, where I talked about all of these things, and I responded to questions and answers and stuff like that. But as political situations have evolved, I had to start investing more time focusing when it comes to my content on the political and spiritual literal war that we are in, because I talked in the interview 2 weeks ago with Aaron Smith about this. It is true that we have to be physically healthy, because when you're physically healthy, it also improves your mental condition. So it's somewhat of a prerequisite. It's not required. I mean, there's fat people who are intelligent and understand what's going on with politics, but they may know what's going on with politics, but they don't have longevity. And likely they're in chronic pain, and likely they're suffering from some level of impaired self-confidence, impaired self-image, some form of envy and resentment. And I don't want that for anybody. When you purge all of that from your life by just being obedient, I talked about the Christian attributes of the fitness lifestyle in that interview. People think bodybuilding and fitness guys and all that stuff, it's all about narcissism and having a six-pack and vanity, or perhaps even trying to invoke lust. You're trying to get this physique so that people will think you're hot or whatever. If you're a Christian, there are 6 to 12 different fundamental principles of Christianity that you will receive through your dedication to fitness. And when one of them is humility, it starts out with humility. What's going on, Anthony? Hope you're doing well, brother. It starts out with a self-assessment of confession that says, I was living this way. I have to humble myself. I thought I was doing pretty good. I thought it wasn't that big of a deal, that I wasn't intentionally taking care of these things. But I confess that I was wrong, right? So there's humility that says, I'm not doing well for myself. And when God looks down on me, he knows that I have succumbed to lust, gluttony, sloth, envy, all the different sins, but in particular, how it impacts your physical health. Sloth and gluttony are sins. These things separate you from God, and they are physically and spiritually harmful. So when I say that pursuing fitness is a righteous Christian thing to do, it starts to chisel away those weaknesses of sloth and gluttony And it starts to chisel away your pride, where you thought you had all of the answers about, it's not that big of a deal if I just eat whatever, and it's not that big of a deal if I don't exercise. It starts to force you to reassess and ultimately repent. Where have we heard that word before? Jesus, right? Jesus says you have to be humble. You have to confess when you're wrong. You have to repent. You have to avoid sloth and gluttony. It's just on and on. Like, this stuff is so clearly, obviously enriching for the Christian soul to prioritize. You know, this is why I'm not just an evangelist for the Christian faith, I'm also an evangelist for fitness. And this is one of the things that makes me starkedly, is that a word? Starkedly? I think so. Obviously different than Nick Fuentes. And this is not a slant against Nick, because Nick is currently 26 years old, and I didn't start exercising until I was 27. And I used to say all the exact same things that Nick does. I used to make fun of guys who go to the gym and call them muscle heads, and I assumed that their motivation was purely narcissistic and that they had low self-esteem and they were just trying to hook up with girls and all this other stuff. And that's exactly what Nick says. And Nick does not pursue fitness and dieting as a high priority in his life. As I said, this isn't an attack at Nick. It's not saying that he misunderstands the world. It's an aging and maturity thing, where I really hope, I pray for him, that ultimately he'll get to the point of acknowledging that not only is this stuff just common sense and everybody really should be doing it, and it shouldn't be advice that you give in principle. Like, he's willing to concede, yeah, obviously exercise is a good thing. Obviously controlling your diet's a good thing. But it's not something he advocates for, and it's certainly not held to the same level as becoming politically aware and engaging in your faith. Whereas my platform holds all three equal. I say white identity, Christ culture, fitness lifestyle. All three must be checked off in your life. The physical fitness is what chisels away all of those sinful characteristics, not to the point of perfection, obviously, but it does start to elbow out all of the, I mentioned before, what Ted would call surrogate activities, but it also does purify you in terms of the amount of sin in your life. With this sloth and gluttony, it'll purify the resentful perception and the envy that you have towards other people who have done it, who actually have just confessed, been humble, and repented. And you'll start to see things, including those people, differently. And so that's always been, from day one of this platform, a non-negotiable for me. And I take a lot of heat for it. I'll take heat just for doing a live stream with my shirt off, right? I'm sitting in a pool, okay? By the way, I'm not doing this just for no reason. But people, when I started this platform, they would focus on one of the three pillars of the platform, and they would tell me that you have to give that part up if you want the platform to succeed. They would say, okay, you're a Christian man, right? You're going out there talking about how men need to be engaged in the faith and all this, but you're over there posting pictures of yourself in your swimsuit or your Calvin Kleins or something like that. Don't you know that that can invoke lust? Don't you know that that's vanity? And don't you know blah, blah, blah? And so I already explained to you guys how the motivation, you can't project onto somebody else what their motivation is. You genuinely never know. You're coming at it first time you've ever seen that person, and you're making assumptions about them. And so I had to stand on principle and say, the reason I show progress pictures is because when I preach, if it fits your macros, when I preach intermittent fasting, when I preach how to calculate your total daily energy expenditure, when I say I've been doing this for 11 years, okay, and I started at absolutely nothing. I was a skinny, fat, unremarkable loser. And I achieved a fitness model's physique in the course of 4 years, and I've just held on to it ever since then. How can I prove to people that I have shaved virtually all the body fat off of my body and I have maximized the amount of muscle a 5'9" guy can have, which is about 40, 50 pounds of muscle over those years? There's literally no way to show people the proof of the gaining of the muscle and the losing of the fat without showing them the muscle and the loss of fat. And so the fact that I have to sit out here and articulate the fact that this is why the progress pictures are out there, That's frustrating to me because people will always uncharitably look at any single post or any single video, a clip from a video, and project onto you what they have already assumed about you. And so they were telling me when I started this platform that if you're going to be talking about doing the Great Commission for Christ, and you're also going to be talking about politics, nobody's going to take you seriously if you're over there posting progress picture updates and stuff like that. And so I said, fuck you, I know what I'm doing. Likewise, people said, if you're going to go out there and stand on the cross and say the Great Commission is so important, well, you've accumulated at that point 10,000 followers or something like that. If you're going to harp on Christianity being the exclusive, only true religion, and that's the fact according to Jesus himself, John 14:6, we all know what it says. I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. Nobody comes to the Father except through me. So it's not a matter of interpretation. It's not Josh's opinion. It's not exegesis of the text theorizing that I think Jesus said he's the only real way to know God. No, that's what Jesus said. It's in the book of John, chapter 14, verse 6. So when I did that, a lot of people were telling me that if you're going to say America has to be a Christian nation with Christian leaders only in its government, you're going to exclude and you're going to ostracize all of your non-Christian following. So maybe the people who were following you for bodybuilding or they were following you for politics, but they don't like that you're so uncompromising and exclusionary on saying the fact that there is only one way to know God. Everything else is false prophecy, idolatry. And so if I listen to them, then I have to give up the Christian only part. If I listen to the people criticizing me about bodybuilding, I have to give up that part. And then obviously the big one there is advocating for white people, white identity. Every single day, guys, I get 300 to 400 messages, and inevitably 1, 2, sometimes more of them are, you call yourself a Christian, but you're actually a white supremacist. How can you say what you do about white people while being a Christian? And this is one of those things that's very hard for me to not just take a gun and blow my brains out, because I have to address this question every single day of my life. And I've done it so many times. I've done it in long format with entire documentaries. I've done it in an hour-long articulation, usually once or twice a week in these vlogs, whether it's on Substack, Rumble, YouTube, Instagram. But this is the problem. Because the platform has grown to now 42,000 followers, there's always going to be new people jumping in and seeing the information for the first time. And so I have to control my response and not just blow up at them and say, like, look, if you don't get it, you're just stupid. You know, 10 years ago, I probably would have not understood it either. I would have said those two things are contradictory. How can you be a Christian who's supposed to love everybody equally? And there's neither Greek nor Jew nor Gentile, all one in Christ, quote from Galatians and all that stuff. And this is what I've covered so many times on the vlog that I don't even feel like doing it right now. So this is not a question and answer session on how can you advocate for white people but also be Christian. What I was explaining though is the people who would say, I love that you're out there doing the Great Commission and saying we have to have a Christian nation. And I don't even necessarily have a problem with the fitness lifestyle stuff, but you have to give up advocating for white people because that contradicts this part. And so this is the thing. If I listen to the people giving me feedback about my platform, about how they think they know better than I do what's required for society or just for the success of my platform, I'd have to give up all three. I would have to give up, seriously, everything that has made me succeed according to their feedback in order to succeed. And so I think the life lesson here is when you have a clear vision, you have to pray for God for discernment that you have understood the mission correctly. Pray for the courage to just trust Him and trust Him to lay out the path before you and correct you when you're wrong. But the peanut gallery, your family, your friends, your church group, all these other people telling you that, well, in my opinion, I think this is the way you should go. I always ignored literally all of that. Like seriously, I ignored everybody's advice and I've been pretty successful with it. I think the numbers speak for themselves. We'll see. And in terms of actually turning it into a business, not just like a hobby social media account, I made that decision and the business itself is slowly growing. That was largely I should say the Substack was part of that decision where we have to figure out a way to monetize the platform, partially to de-risk the constant attacks on my actual career. I put a couple $100,000 at risk every year to do this work. And I don't think people appreciate that. I don't even think people are aware of that. That if I wanted to just sail off into the sunset, save my acorns for retirement and for my future family, not talk about these things that aren't so controversial, not have to worry about the ADL and the Southern Poverty Law Center and all the Jews coming after me because I say exactly what Jesus said about them, or if black people and other non-white people want to come after me and try to get me fired because I'm allegedly racist or whatever, all of that is on the line indefinitely unless I just decide to stop doing the work. And the funny thing is, at this point, we're too far gone to try to go backward. The historical stuff, like, there's no way I could delete my entire social media footprint from the last 3 years of 2,500 Instagram posts, hundreds and hundreds of hours of YouTube videos. I could delete the accounts, but people could use the Internet Archive, people could dig it up, and I don't want to. It's a righteous mission. I have no desire to do that. And so far, I accredit God for successfully giving me the articulation to be able to defend all of my positions when my career has been attacked. I did have to go forward to the Sanhedrin of all female HR employers at one of my previous jobs because anonymous social justice warriors sent a complaint to my employer saying, I don't think this guy can create an inclusive workplace for women and minorities. And so, as I said, suddenly the couple $100,000 I make per year is at risk because a completely anonymous coward on the internet felt like they had the right to contact my employer and destroy my life. That's how serious the situation is. Like, that's how fragile the whole situation is. And that's what's always at risk for me. And so I get this feedback too, man, where I just propose, hey guys, if you have the resources, you want to help me out by trying to de-risk some of these financial risks that I take, support the Substack. It's $12 a month, eat one less fast food meal, okay? It's not that big of a deal. People are like, oh, so now you're grifting. It's like, this is how it is. If you're going to have success in social media, create a large platform, you'll pretty quickly find out that no matter what you do, no matter what subject matter you become an expert in, or whatever you want to weigh in on, politics, sports, anything, there's going to be haters. And there's going to be people who just don't like you, and they don't want you to succeed. And this isn't even just on social media. This is also your friend circles, and you might find out, surprisingly, your own family members. People who are very close to you, who have known you for years, when you announce that, hey, these are my priorities now. I'm going to teach people how to be physically healthy, and I'm going to teach them how to defend themselves if they're white in terms of their group and making sure we get rid of this whole white guilt thing. And I'm going to stand up for Christ and say that it's a non-negotiable thing, that our society should be founded in Christian principles. And I can do all these things simultaneously. Well, plot twist, a lot of people are not going to be so supportive of that mission. So I had to endure all those things. And fortunately, most of them are, I'm not going to say ironed out. They've just been sacrificed. Like they're already gone. I've already gone through the pain of losing those things. And it's difficult too, if you're going to wade in these controversial waters, to establish any kind of business coalition of people wanting to do business with you, because obviously they'll come after those business partners and they worry what's going to happen to their business, and their business is the way they feed their family and themselves, and they pay their mortgage and so on. And so it is just one giant uphill struggle to do all of this stuff. And it's a one-man show. The entire 3 years, every video that is filmed, edited, upload, all the comments that are responded to, it's a one-man show. And so if you appreciate the work, I would appreciate you if you helped out on Substack, because not only will it, as I said, de-risk against the attacks on my actual career, but there's also some additional value there. I didn't want to just say, hey, everybody, start helping me out if you can. I wanted to provide something extra for people who are willing and able to do so. And so Substack is the perfect platform for that, because you can have exclusivity on certain content. And you can offer like a free preview, first 15 minutes, something like that, to pay to free members. And then for your premium members who are paying a monthly subscription or an annual subscription, they can see the whole content. And so that's how I dropped the last documentary about group behavior. It's still exclusive only on Substack. I think I put the first 15 minutes on YouTube, but it's over an hour long, where we go through 5 different ways to handle the narrative strategy and the confrontation of talking about group behavior, where people always, you've seen this many times before, to the point that it's actually a meme, where you start talking about blacks and criminal behavior, or you start talking about Jews and their control of censorship and the banks and pushing pornography, creating communism, and all these other things that the Jews are responsible for. People will inevitably always say, well, not all black people, not all Jews. When you start criticizing women and feminism, well, not all women. Once again, this is one of those things that just makes me want to take a gun and blow my head off, because I've had this discussion so many times, to the point where I got to saying, I just have to do a full-length documentary destroying that argument. Not just like one rebuttal. There's 5 rebuttals to that. And this is not a session devoted to that. It's exclusive on Substack if you want to learn all 5 different methods. I could maybe give you 1 or 2 of them just for free, just because we're hanging out. Which one should I pick? There's a political aspect to it. There is a biblical aspect to it. We'll go biblical, just because that's the one that surprises a lot of people. They think that because you're a Christian, you have to treat everybody as an individual, and that should be self-explanatory. It's obvious that, sure, they may be black, they may be Jewish, they may be a woman, but you need to look at them specifically and give them the benefit of the doubt until proven wrong. Sounds good, right? Sounds pretty convincing. That you shouldn't be talking about women with one broad stroke, and you shouldn't be talking about Jews as if they're all the same, and blah, blah, blah. Well, the response to that, if you want to use the Bible as your accreditation to do so, you can say, pick a verse. Let's pick Revelation 2:9 or Revelation 3:9, where Jesus is talking about the Jews who call themselves Jews but are not. Rather, they are the synagogue of Satan. Does Jesus in that verse say some Jews? No, he says the Jews. When in Titus, Paul is writing to Titus about the Cretians, the Cretes, and he talks about how they are. He uses the word all, and he also uses the word always. He says the Cretians are always evil and filling up their bellies with all kinds of sin. Why wasn't Paul stopping and saying, worried about all these politically correct social justice warriors, there are some good Cretans. I'm just making a general statement about group behavior. He doesn't do that. When the many prophets of the Old Testament rebuke Israel, and they say, you, Israel, all Israelites, have fallen into apostasy. You're worshiping a golden calf. You're doing any number of things. You've intermixed with other cultures. God told you not to do that. You've fallen into idolatry and any other form of sin. The prophets warn of this at a national level all of the time. They don't stop and say, but I know some of you guys aren't sinning. I know some of you guys are doing better than others. It's ludicrous. The standard doesn't even apply to Jesus himself when he's talking about the Pharisees, for example. He doesn't say, well, there's some Pharisees who are actually just obeying the laws of Moses, and that's all that's expected of them, and that's right. No, he just says, you Pharisees are like whitewashed tombs, pretty on the outside, but full of maggots and death inside. Right? I think you get the picture. Jesus himself, the Apostle Paul, the other apostles, the prophets of the Old Testament, over and over again, you see them refer to nations of people, groups of people, and condemn their behavior. We, as Christians, aren't obligated because of our Christian faith to stop and add a disclaimer every time we talk about group behavior, whether it's the blacks and their criminal behavior, their ingratitude for living in a European nation, their dependence, economically speaking, that they just ignore and pretend isn't real. If you want to talk about women and how they are a loose cannon on society when left without male stewardship, you don't have to stop and say, but there are some chaste women who are not sleeping around and who are not aiming at a career and are just trying to find their husband and have kids. You don't have to add that disclaimer. You can talk about the problems of modern women. Did you know that? You can just have problems with entire groups of people without having to apologize to the individuals within that group who don't meet that standard. So that's the biblical perspective. I could give you one more. I'll give you one more here. And then if you want the other three, you need to go get yourself a Substack subscription. This is a great one, and it's irrefutable. Just like the biblical one, you see group behavior diagnosed and rebuked by Jesus, the prophets, all the apostles. It's undeniable. It's there in the text. If that standard was supposed to apply to Christians, then why weren't the Christians following it back then? Well, here's another example of where studying group behavior and drawing insights about a common trend is practiced all the time, and nobody blinks an eye. Every single politician who has achieved success, this is true at the city level, the county level, the state level, and the federal level, they consult think tanks, which are corporations, small businesses, who are given the task of studying group behavior, aka sociology. And they study the different racial groups, religious groups, different classes of the economy. They study even sexuality groups. How do straight people vote versus how do gay people vote? How do transgenders vote? How do black people vote? How do white people vote? How do Christians vote versus how do atheists vote? These think tanks, who are working on the behalf, highly paid, by the way, by every single politician who holds public office, they're effective at what they do. They help them win elections. That's why they're so highly paid. Whether it's the Heritage Foundation or pick any number of the ones that you want. This is why they exist. If the study of group behavior didn't correctly identify factually true common behaviors across whatever group you're talking about, those think tanks wouldn't exist. They would go out of business because the advice they were giving wasn't true. Do you see? And so the study of group behavior is not only objectively and observably true and verified by politicians. Here's another example. Every single product you buy, when you go to Walmart, Target, whatever other retail store, or even e-commerce, when you're shopping on a website, every large corporation hires the same think tanks or similar private sector-based marketing firms to do what? To study group behavior. What are women particularly interested in buying? What goods and what services do they care the most about? What do black people spend the majority of their income on? Because this information is how they sculpt their marketing campaigns. It's called demographic audience. They gather shopping behaviors, they gather polls to understand what it is each of these groups are motivated by and what they're interested in, how they behave. And the fact that they give that information to the companies, these marketing firms, these think tanks, they give that group information to the companies create a marketing campaign based on that, and they make money. Did you, like, wow, who would have thought studying group behavior is objectively true and effective in politics? It's objectively true and verified in the private sector with marketing. It's morally unimpeachable according to the Bible. So why do we have such a problem here? The answer to that question is political correctness. The study of group behavior and trying to quash that argument and say, no, not all black people act that way. No, it's not all Jews who act that way. It's not all women who act that way. It's not a matter of them trying to aware you to the fact that maybe you hadn't realized that literally every woman behaves that way. Literally every black behaves that way. Literally every Jew has those beliefs. They're not trying to educate you. Hopefully you guys get that. They're not actually believing that, oh, you know what? I actually thought it was every single one of them. Wow, thank you for explaining that to me. You know, I had never thought that there might be exceptions to the group, but now that you have reminded me, this has completely changed everything. Come on. That's not why they are interrupting the conversation to insert this distraction, this rhetoric that says, well, we can't take what you're saying seriously because exceptions to what you're saying exist. The only actual intent of that statement, of that rebuttal, is first and foremost a confession that they haven't done the group studies themselves. They don't want to say that. They don't want to be caught not knowing the socioeconomic data, but they also want to virtue signal, and they want to let everybody know who's listening, and especially you, Mr. Evil Stereotype guy, that they're actually a better person than you. Because they see people as Martin Luther King saw them. They judge people by the content of their character. You judge people by their skin color. You judge people by their religion. You judge people by their gender. And I'm not like that. That's what's really happening there, okay? As I said, it's not whatsoever a motivation of, well, have you considered that there might be individuals who this doesn't apply? They know that. They're trying to project a superiority of virtuousness, and they're trying to really steer from the conversation of they actually don't know the facts. They have not sat down and read the FBI's Universal Crime Report. They have not sat down and looked at the voting behavior of the different religious groups, of the different ethnic groups, of the different genders. I have. I can tell you, factually, 80 to 90% of black people vote for Democrats. Okay, that's a problem if you're not a Democrat. I can tell you that unmarried women, 72% of them vote for Democrats. Okay, that's a problem. And this isn't a two-party system problem. I'm not talking about the whole problem is Republicans versus Democrats. What I'm explaining is the Democrat Party represents a suite of ideologies, right? It represents feminism, it represents multiculturalism, it represents religious ambivalence, it represents open borders, it represents going after people's guns. It's like everything that you as a sane conservative person don't want in charge. But here's the problem. I just told you that 80 to 90% of black people vote for politicians who want those things to happen. And I just told you that 72% of women vote for politicians who want to create laws to help those things happen. So when I get on my platform and say women should not have the right to vote, because clearly they cannot handle that responsibility. That's where that information is coming from. It's not because I hate women. It's not because I want to throw them in cages. It's not because I want to oppress them. It's because this is a matter of national responsibility. Women cannot handle the national responsibility of contributing to politics. Look at the rulings of the female Supreme Court justices. Every single time it's a matter of immigration, abortion, so on and so forth. They are always hamstringing the conservative side of politics with their liberal feminist perspectives. What's going on? Is it MT Cali? Oh, I hope that doesn't mean California. You got to get out of there. You got to get out of California, man. Sodom and Gomorrah. So, and the same thing is true with Jews, by the way. Did you know 80+% of Jews are atheists? Period. Okay, that's a problem when you look at Jewish representation across all of our civil institutions and you point out the objective truth that despite being 2% of the population, they are all over the government, all over the finance industry. They run virtually all of Silicon Valley. They run the higher education circuit, especially the Ivy Leagues. Could it be a problem that the people running all of those absolutely critical levers of influence in our society either don't believe in God or have active resentment to God? Do you think maybe that's part of the problem of our nation? The fact that the most powerful civil institutions, the people running them, a disproportionate slice of them don't like God, yeah, I think that is a problem. So this is the rationale of being able to explain when I talk in broad strokes about group behavior. Okay, well, those 20% of Jews who aren't atheists, they believe in some kind of God. Most of them are Jewish. They practice Talmudic rabbinical Judaism. Okay, well, the problem with that is they explicitly hate Jesus. In their doctrine, in the Babylonian Talmud, it says Jesus is burning in hell. Okay, so that's not somebody we want in charge of our nation. And so now you actually get down to the single-digit percentage of Jews who are actually Christian. They're ethnically Jewish, but they practice the Christian faith. That's great. Okay, good. I'm glad that there are some Jewish Christians out there who have accepted Christ. But the 90+% of them have not. Okay, and so when it comes to figuring out who should be in the leadership positions, the most powerful positions in our nation, maybe a broad statement such as that group, 90+% of them don't believe in God or hate God. So I don't want them anywhere near the levers of power. Oh, and by the way, 90+% of them are Zionists. 90+% of them care more about a foreign nation than they do the country that they are leading, whether it's determining the education curriculum, the domestic policy, foreign policy, economic policy in the government. They are owning and determining what you see when you turn on Netflix, when you go on Facebook, when you go on Instagram, when you search anything in Google. It is going through people who care more about a foreign nation and hate God. And the same is true for YouTube, the platform you're watching me on, the platform where you may not be watching me on for very long. So this is the problem. Like, this is the articulation that everybody watching and everybody who follows my platform, I want to be educating people, not just that these things are true and that they're objectively, verifiably, measurably true, that if you want to go down and look at the White House cabinet and start checking off how many of them are Jews or women or non-white people, all of which hold a conflict of interest to white identity and Christian nationalism, you'll find out that we're in the minority. White male Christians in government are now the minority. Get out of here. And when you look at who runs the media, who runs higher education, who runs the finance industry, you're going to find out the same thing. And it's not just that white people are a minority, it's that those are hugely skewed towards either ethnic or religious Jews, both of which have a conflict of interest. They don't care about the white majority, white leadership, and most of them hate Christ. So pretty big problem. But this is the point of my platform, is to educate people, not just that these things are happening, that you can go and verify that they are true, but also what I call narrative strategy, to be able to serve up the answers to those common rebuttals of, yeah, but it's not all Jews, and it's not all women, and it's not all blacks. That's why that 5-answer documentary exists, is to say, next time you hear that common retort, here's how you can respond. You can pick one. Ideally, you'll come with all of them and you'll completely obliterate their argument. The next documentary series, it's going to have to be a series. I've been hyping this one up for you guys. We got to have the conversation about segregation. You know, that's a big one where even a lot of Christian white people can kind of understand, you know, look, black people have their culture. I don't really like it. I don't really want to be a part of it, but I can kind of self-isolate, you know, like I can try to make enough money to move into a neighborhood where there's just not that many black people. There's a lot of people who think that way, and I'm going to shock you with why that cannot be the answer with this documentary series. Once you see the overwhelming amount of evidence that I have compiled, that this is not a matter of, oh, well, first and foremost, it shouldn't be an expectation that the only way to not have to be around and deal with black culture is to commit yourself to the rat race, work double overtime, put yourself into dramatic amounts of debt, defer investing in a marriage and children just so you can get enough money to pay for a house that isn't in that part of town. That shouldn't be the expectation, to not have to live around crime, vandalization, people blaring their music into all hours of the night, prostitutes on the corner, drug dealers on the corner. That shouldn't be a requirement. That wasn't a requirement. Okay, this country existed without all of that riffraff for 350 years. It's only after we desegregated by force at gunpoint. I did a vlog about this. You guys need to go watch the vlog I published today, because I went off hard on this subject of where did this whole segregation thing come from? Who was it that convinced America that we really needed to do this? And it's not even just segregation. It was the concept of multiculturalism even being a good thing hypothetically. I just realized, like, the sun, is that the sun that's like poking through my hair there? I don't know. So yeah, there's a really good vlog that I dropped today where I talk about the Hart-Celler Act, and I talk about, forget his first name, but Mr. Levinson, who was the ghostwriter for all of Martin Luther King's speeches, who was, oh, what do you know, a man of the tribe. Emanuel Celler, who wrote the Hart-Celler Act, co-wrote it, was also a man of the tribe. And he didn't just co-write the 1965 Immigration Act. He had been working since literally the 1920s on changing immigration policy in America. This Jewish guy spent 40 years in the government, slowly, over time, starting with just adjusting some immigration policy about the Chinese, and then over time, continually stripping it down, until no rules. Everybody can come live in America. Doesn't matter. So if you want the receipts, the names, the dates, the events, all that stuff, watch that vlog from earlier today. It was a good one. Let's see, let me look at this chat real quick to make sure I'm not missing important questions. How do we remove the Ashkenazi Jews, though? They own all the governors and Congress. Well, everybody wants there to be a simple answer to this, but there isn't. It's a long play. The simplest answer I can provide is it wouldn't matter if it was black people who had taken over the government, or if it was Arab Muslims who had taken over the government, or in this case, Jews who have taken over the government. The solution would still be the same. The solution would still be white Christian men have to take on the responsibility of becoming educated, articulate, demonstrating essential character attributes like courage, the willing to self-sacrifice for the greater good. We need men to do those things, and we need women prioritizing helping those men, not prioritizing their own independence, doing whatever they want. I have to go find myself. I have to go travel the world. I have to go create my own career. No. A woman should serve as God told her to serve, as a helper to men. I've talked about this many times in my vlogs, that women's role are medics. If you think of them in terms of, like, very practically speaking. Men's role are to be the defenders and the providers. We go out on the front lines of the physical and spiritual and economic battle to protect our home, our family, and our community. That's our job. We go out and we deal with those conflicts. We fight for the ranks to get promoted and to develop our skills and all that. We fight, if we have to, for our community and our nation. If the enemy is closing in from the borders, then that's where the men have to go. And similarly, just as the Bible prescribes, men hold the authority in the church and on the spiritual landscape of the country to confront any anti-Christian influence. So men are the fighters on all three of those things: the economy, the physical safety, and the spiritual safety of the nation. Where women are supposed to be conducting themselves is in support as a helper, a healer, and as I call it, a medic for those men. They come home from the battle saying, it's absolutely brutal out there in the economy. I'm trying to get a job. I'm over here fighting against H-1B visa Indian immigrants who are willing to work for half as much. It's pretty fucking stressful. I've sent out 1,000 resumes and people still aren't responding. Okay, the woman's job should be there to be there to emotionally support, understand the difficulties of being the provider. And likewise, if this is a good example, if you put yourself just 150 years back in time, maybe a little bit more than 150, imagine the Civil War was still going on. Or if you want to make a more modern example, imagine the Iraq War was going on. Pick whatever war in the Gulf you want. Imagine you're the wife of a soldier who is coming home from battle. Her job is not to nag him and complain about household things and all this other stuff. Her job is to literally patch him back together. and help him de-stress. And as I said, heal him, be a healing presence, a calming presence. He's not wanting to come home to arguments and confrontations. It's not to say you have to be silent and you're not allowed to have opinions. I'm not, a tyrant, but what I am saying is that the role is a helper. And so when the man comes home from the metaphorical battle, whether it's spiritual and economic and all those other things, or the physical battle, the woman should be there ready and willing and excited to help him in those battles. And so the answer to the question is, what do we do? It doesn't matter that it's Jews specifically that are controlling the levers of power. The men have to take on those battles. The men have to say, I will work as hard as possible to provide. Okay, it's not acceptable for me to work into the entry level where I have just enough money for a 1-bedroom apartment and my groceries and a car. That's not enough. Okay, you have to keep working. You have to work harder to secure additional resources to demonstrate that you are a good provider. At the same time, because that's already a very difficult mission when you're competing against immigrants and you're competing against just a highly competitive society. It is the way it is. I know, okay? I've been in the career field for 20 years building this thing. You have to also invest in your physical health because it is tied to your mental health. And so you have to fight against sloth and gluttony and all of the forces that the material world tell you, you can be healthy at any weight. It's not that big of a deal. You can do that later. You have to have the mental fortitude to say, I know there is an easier path. I know that that exists. I know I could sit here and play hours and hours of video games or watch streaming content, do whatever meaningless activity, surrogate activity, as we talked about before. But I'm going to fight against the mainstream. I'm going to fight against what the world says I should do. And I'm going to go out and fight for my own self. I'm going to go fight for my own health. And I'm going to go fight against sin. And I'm going to fight for longevity so that I can be there as a provider for my future family and my wife and my children, right? We have to reinstall that fighting spirit of men that says, like, I don't give a fuck what the world says. I don't give a fuck how hard the economy is. And I don't give a fuck if the spiritual situation in America, where we used to be 90% Christian and now we're 50%, that sounds pretty blackpilling. I don't care if you're a white guy and you know the demographic data that says less than one lifetime ago in the 1960s, we were a 90% white country. Now we're 58%. We have a negative birth rate. Whites are already a minority among newborns. They're flooding the country with millions of immigrants every year who aren't white. I know all of this sounds blackpilling, and I know even if I wanted to say anything about it, they're going to come and attack my career that's already hard enough to build, and they're going to come and try to financially destroy me, reputationally destroy me. I know they're going to do all that, but I'm not going to be a coward. I'm going to go out there and fight, okay? Like, I'm going to go fight the spiritual war, fight the economic war. I'm going to fight against myself and the instincts that the world tells me I should just listen to, that I should just lay around and not work that hard. We need the men out there fighting because that will reestablish the purpose for women. Right now, women don't even have a purpose. They've been turned loose in society and given no goals. It's just fill in the blanks. You want to become an e-celebrity? You want to make as much money as possible and buy a mansion? You want to be a boss girl and get off on having power over other women or men? It's just fill in the blanks. Do whatever you want as a woman. We have to get them seeing men do respectable, difficult things so that they want to help in those endeavors and that they actually respect men again. Because I talk to both genders all the time. I do long format conversations about these difficult gender dynamics. And the response inevitably from the Christian base trad wife women that all you guys say you want, their response is always, when I go out into the dating landscape, I'm just not impressed. I'm not seeing men who are out there fighting for virtually anything. They're all pretty much happy making whatever meager salary they have, and time that they spend not working is devoted to, they don't know they're called surrogate activities, but they're devoted to video games, pornography, streaming content, asinine hobbies, putting puzzles together or something. You know, like, I don't even know what these people are doing, but it's obviously not maximizing their physical health, engaging in the faith, and busting their ass to be good providers. And so because women aren't seeing that, they're like, fuck it, I'll just do it myself. I'll go be the provider. Okay, I'll go do the difficult work of having to compete in the economic battle. So I did a whole vlog about that, about why the gender thing has broken down. It's because men are no longer fighters, and therefore women don't see themselves as helpers. Like, why? You don't need help if you're a guy who's going and working in a cubicle for 40 hours a week, coming home and not doing anything other than, hey, I worked 40 hours a week and now I'm stressed, and so I just get to check out, play PlayStation and Xbox and computer games, and watch porn and watch Netflix. What woman is going to see that and say, like, this guy is earned my respect and he's doing very difficult things that I think I could help him if I were helping him heal and nurture and provide emotional support for him? It's just not that noble. It's not an impressive life. It's not inspiring. And so as much beef as I get myself into, where I talk about how women are completely off the rails and how they need to change, this is an honest man-to-man conversation about the men out there, because I see it. I'm not out there trying to date other guys, and I see it, okay? I see the modern generation of men, and I am not inspired. Like, I see how low their goals are. And it's like, I just want to make enough money to be able to eat and, you know, maybe feed my dog. And like, that could have been the limit for me too. And it actually was up until I was like 27 years old. All I really cared about was I had my little 2-bedroom apartment. I wanted enough money to feed my dog, and I really just wanted to be left alone. And if a woman comes along who is attractive and likes my personality, then great. But that was it. Like, there was not a methodical approach to, I got to bust my ass, figure out how I can get the skills and the education I need to maximize my income. And there certainly wasn't any political awareness in terms of how should I be contributing to society at large? Because providence is about you, your family, and your household. But men historically are the protectors of your communities. They're the protectors of your states and your nation and Christendom and your people, the whites. Yes, we exist. Just like a lot of black people do black activism work, and they have Latin support groups, and the Jews have 50+ Jewish advocacy groups. We should be doing the same. White men should be advocating for other white men. White families, I should say. White men should be advocating for white families. And being out there on the front lines doing that. Supporting other white businesses, engaging in politics, and pointing out the double standards and hypocrisy that favor non-white people and antagonize and withhold opportunities from white people. That's what we should be doing. So that's the general prognosis and diagnosis of where we're at and where we need to get down to brass tacks. Like, somebody just start walking people through. What do you got to do to fix this? Women have to step down. They have to discard this idea that they should have authority over men and that they should have authority in politics. They got to let that shit go. Get back to the mindset of, God put me on this earth, as he said in Genesis, to be a helper of man. And so that should be my North Star. That should be my singular highest priority in life, other than my direct relationship with God. Tell me, how many women do you know will say that their highest priority in their life, assuming they're Christian, is helping a man? Zero. Virtually zero. But it should be. It's literally in the first book, the first chapter of the Bible. It's as cut as dry as you can possibly get. The reason you are created is to be the helper of man. And so when you live in denial of your stated purpose that God has given you, you're going to struggle in life. It's the same thing about men who have the Peter Pan syndrome and don't want to grow up and accept the fact that they're supposed to be providers, protectors, and fighters. They want to check out of all of those fights. They want to make just enough money to survive, just enough to afford the Netflix and everything else. And they don't want to handle anything political, because that's just uncomfortable. They don't want women calling them misogynists, and they don't want non-white people calling them racist, and they don't want gay people calling them homophobic, They don't want Muslims calling them Islamophobes. They're afraid of being called everything under the sun, so they just say, I'm not going to touch politics at all. That's unacceptable. I can't remember. Oh man, my dog is like scratching on the door. He wants out here. I can't remember who the quote is from, but I believe it goes something along the lines of to not understand, or to not engage with politics, or to not participate with politics, is to agree to be ruled by tyrants. That's what it is. And that's what the majority of the proletariat, the goy, us stupid goy who just, think we shouldn't have to pay attention to politics. Oh, that's for other people. That's like people who do that as a hobby. I casted my vote so that somebody could do all of that for me, right? You thought you engaged in politics by just going to the ballot box once every 4 years, and that's your political contribution. You watched a little bit of Fox News to try to figure out why the Republicans better than the libtards. And that's the extent of your political understanding of the world. That's not going to cut it. Like, that is nowhere near the level of understanding we need of the political situation in America. And it's men's responsibility to have that understanding. It is not women's. It's literally the opposite. You give women the political responsibility for a society and it goes down the tubes almost immediately. We've seen this. This is the results of feminism. I went over the statistics before. So, anyways, I think I'm going to wrap it up, you guys. This has been a 71-minute stream. I was thinking, I don't even know what I'm going to talk about on this stream. I should probably wrap it up with what the name of the stream is. I forgot. We'll go ahead and hang out for a couple more minutes because I called the stream the psyop about Trump saying that Biden was a clone, right? You guys may have seen this headline. Hold on, let me take a swig of my Gatorade, which is now completely lukewarm. I swallowed that wrong. Went down the wrong pipe. Oh, goodness. Are we good? I think we're good. So Trump posted on Truth Social, which is an interesting note because it wasn't on X, where he has been unbanned for the last 2 years or something like that. But he chooses to make this post on Truth Social talking about how Joe Biden died 5 years. Joe Biden died 5 years ago. And either it's a clone or it's an actor wearing a mask or something like that. And now keep in mind, these weren't his words. He was sharing a conspiracy theory post about this subject. And so this is, in my opinion, a very obvious demonstration of red meat. Red meat. You need to understand what that means in a political context. Red meat is a piece of news, entertainment, information, whatever, that the powers that be will dangle in front of you because they know this is what you want. They did the same thing with the Epstein files. I'm sure you remember this. Oh yeah, they're coming any day now. Going all the way back to the campaign trail. Soon as I get into office, we're getting those Epstein files. He gets into office, he says, I'm going to appoint the right people at the FBI so that you get the Epstein files. He appoints Pam Bondi, he appoints Kash Patel, he appoints, what's the other one? Dan Bongino to lead the FBI. Pam Bondi's the Attorney General, the highest legislative official in the country. And he says, these are my picks. This is the highest lawyer in the country. This is the head of the CIA and his #1 report. They're going to give you guys the Epstein files. Well, we all know how that played out. But it helped him in the short term. The red meat of, hey guys, you get behind me, you're going to get this information you've been waiting for 10 plus years or however long it's been since Epstein, that whole scandal broke. This is the same thing he did with mass deportations. Day one when I get in office, millions of deportation, millions and millions of deportations. Hasn't happened. What else did he say? He said, as soon as I get into office, within 24 hours, I'm going to end the war in Ukraine with Russia. He said this on the campaign trail. Everybody got hyped up. Yeah, finally a no more wars president. What are we seeing happen with that? we are only entrenching ourselves further in Ukraine. We've made this mineral deal with them where we're going to get a share of the precious materials in Ukraine in order for what? Protection. Okay, but I thought the whole point was to extricate ourselves from Ukraine and say, we've already given you too much. And the fact that we are continuing in this relationship is obviously not what Russia wants. And so we are by proxy in a continual conflict with Russia that, so long as we're supporting Ukraine, will not end. So why would you go and make a deal, a long-term deal that says, we are going to get a portion of your mineral resources that you extract? Okay, if you want that to actually happen, you have to defend your investment. And so now we are going to be continually, for as long as this mineral deal exists, defending Ukraine. So that's three things that haven't happened. Epstein files, mass immigration. We're going to get out of the Ukraine situation. You want another one? He says, in the banner of no foreign wars, okay, we are absolutely not going to go to any foreign wars. Knock, knock. Who's that? Oh, it's Israel. Yes, Israel, what would you like? We need you to go to war with Iran. We need $14 billion so that we can bomb 50,000 innocent women and children in Palestine. We need you to send your 2 aircraft carriers off the coast to shoot down missiles in case anybody shoots at us. We need you to go destroy the Houthis. It's like, okay, but I thought the whole point of your campaign was we're going to do something about mass immigration, which you haven't done. In fact, you've said that we need more legal immigrants. You said that we're going to get as many H-1B visas as possible. And then you didn't do the mass deportations. You didn't end the conflict in Ukraine. You're 24 hours at some point in time, very close to, not literally 24 hours, but I'm saying we are on the knife's edge of being drawn into this conflict with Iran. Here's another campaign promise where he said, he even considered ending the federal income tax. Do you guys remember this? I did an hour-long vlog last year where all you guys, he hung the red meat out there. He said, you know, America didn't have a federal income tax until 1913. And so why can't we go back to that? The previous economic model was supported by tariffs. That was how the overwhelming majority of the government's budget, where its revenue came from, was tariffs on foreign goods. And so, hey, maybe I'll end the federal income tax. And all you guys were like, what? Based? Ending the federal income tax? That's so awesome. The day he made that announcement, I went on the record. It's on Rumble. It's on YouTube. I said, guys, that is not going to happen. That is red meat. That is to get you guys excited. And everybody fell for it. There you go. There's your fell for it again award. Just put that right there on your chest, in the closet with the rest of them. Fell for it again. And what else does he say? He says, we're going to not just end the federal income tax potentially, but also we are going to stand up this robust tariff-based system where all of these other countries who have been taking advantage of us, it's finally our turn. No more free trade. We're going to get our share. How has that worked out? Well, just this week, the Supreme Court said everything you tried to do was illegal, and all of those tariffs have been reversed. So what did Trump actually promise that we got? We didn't get the Epstein files. We didn't get mass immigration. We didn't end the war in Ukraine. We didn't get the federal income tax eliminated. We didn't get free trade brought down. We didn't get a swap where we're suddenly bringing in billions, if not trillions of dollars through tariffs. We didn't figure out a way around the soon coming war with Iran. That's the red meat. But look, here's the thing though, on the whole Biden is a clone thing. The same day, because it's always a timing thing. You need to, every time one of these, he's going to do something that is so based, you need to be looking at what else happened that day or that week. 2 days ago, when he goes out there and makes this Truth Social post where he says, where he's forwarding, it's not his words, but as I said, it's a conspiracy theory reel about how theoretically, possibly, who knows, Joe Biden was actually dead for the last 5 years, and the man running the Oval Office was actually a clone or a robot or an actor in a mask, who knows what. And so everybody is like, whoa, Donald Trump is this based conspiracy theorist now. I can't believe it. And it's on his account, on his platform. That shows he really thinks that means that. Okay, but the same day, he has you guys salivating over this stupid red meat about a conspiracy theory that, look, it might be true. Probably is true. Everybody knows Joe Biden was incapable of running the office. I've seen the mask videos. I've heard all about the cloning stuff, and maybe that is true. But the thing is, it doesn't fucking matter. Anyway, what happened? The timing. The same day he goes and drops this whole Biden might be a clone story, the other big story of the day was Trump grants Palantir exclusive access to the future AI-driven program that is going to harvest all of the personal information off of these various social media platforms and other lesser obvious ways of all United States citizens. And you're like, but he said Biden's a clone. It's like, okay, no one cares, all right? Whether he was or wasn't, it doesn't matter when it comes to the government handing Palantir, who is owned by Alex Karp, who says his number one fear in life is white supremacists coming to his house and killing him. Alex Karp, who takes personal credit for his company Palantir using big data collection and aggregation to dismantle the far right in Europe. Palantir, who is co-owned or co-founded by Peter Thiel, who Peter Thiel is the guy who put J.D. Vance in office. It's the whole PayPal mafia. There's a whole documentary about this that I did called J.D. Vance, the con artist. But Palantir is probably the single worst company to have their hands on our personal data that could exist. Oh, and by the way, during the same 2 or 3 day period, you had Jonathan Greenblatt, King Jew of the ADL, going out and saying, this confusion about freedom of speech is something we have to confront. Anti-Semitism is at an all-time high, and we have to revisit the conversation about what people think free speech means and treat this a little differently given that anti-Semitism is at such a dangerous level. These are his public Twitter posts. So you have the Jewish-owned Palantir publicly harvesting all of your personal information, every post you've ever made that criticizes Israel, the Jews, minorities, whatever. Simultaneously, you have one of the most powerful lobbying groups with the ADL and how they run the censorship engine of all of social media. The social media platforms also being owned by the two Jews who own Google/YouTube and obviously own Meta/Instagram/Facebook. They are now going to be working synergistically to harvest all of our information, thanks to Donald Trump granting them the authority to do so. But Biden is a clone. Oh, okay. I'm so glad that this is where Donald Trump's attention is focused, investigating whether or not Donald Trump was a clone or not. Fantastic. So that was the red meat story that the title of the live stream was about. Don't be distracted. This is the same as we're going to declassify the alien files. We're finally going to tell you the truth about what the FBI knows about UFOs. It's like, guys, what are we doing? What are we doing? These people have weaponized drones that are using AI technology to target people who have been critical of Jews. It's already in existence. They've used it. It's called the Gospel. It's literally named the Gospel. If you look up Israel's AI-driven drone weapons program called the Gospel, and it is responsible for killing tens of thousands of people in Palestine. They harvest all the data, the facial recognition, the social media posts. They feed it through an algorithm, and it gives every individual in that database a ranking, 1 through 100. How likely is it that this person is a problem for Israel and or the Jews? Is it 100? Okay, well that means we should probably bomb them and kill them. If it's 80, maybe we put them on the next up list. We're not going to kill them right now, but we're going to keep watching them and surveilling them and probably kill them eventually. If it's a 60, all right, we're not going to commit to killing them just yet, but we are going to continue to surveil them 24/7. You get the picture. This already exists. It's already being used in Israel using Palantir, using Palantir's technology. People don't understand how serious all this stuff is. They want to talk about whether or not Biden's a clone. They want to talk about UFOs. Ian Carroll wants to talk about red food dye. Candace Owens wants to talk about Emmanuel Marcone's husband slash wife slash uncle slash dad is a transgender. We're not getting what we need here. We're not getting it. Anyways, guys, thanks for hanging out with me. I thoroughly enjoyed this session. A little bit of a venting session, a overdose on vitamin D. My back is probably just bronzed by now. But I'm gonna get back to this Gatorade and then probably work on that intermittent fasting meal. I got some delicious turkey and bacon sandwiches I'm planning. It's either that or it's gonna be tuna sandwiches. I'm not sure. But I have like 2,500 calories to smash later tonight. So I'm very much looking forward to that. And also my phone's probably gonna die any minute now. I'm surprised it could even handle this long of a stream. But thanks for joining the live stream. This is the first one I've done on YouTube. Second technically, but the first one was just a dry run dress rehearsal because I didn't even know if I could stream live on YouTube. Now that I got the kinks out of the system and I had some stuff on my mind, I thought it was a good day to fire it up. I don't know how many of these I'll do. You'll see plenty of vlogs, like probably 4 to 5 vlogs on YouTube and Substack and Rumble every week. But as these opportunities come up where I have a couple hours before dinner time, but I don't want to like sit down and do the lights and all the other stuff for a vlog, maybe I'll drop a notification on Instagram. That's where you get notified. So don't just rely on sheer luck and YouTube notifications. Follow me on Instagram because I put a banner up on my Instagram saying, hey, I'm going live on YouTube. And every day on Instagram, you get 20 or 30 stories. All the stuff I talked about Palantir, Biden is a clone, what's going on with the situation in Ukraine, what's going on with Iran, all that stuff. I share that every single day, up to the hour, 24 hours on Instagram. There's 2,500 posts on Instagram about this stuff. The newly created Substack, as I said, that's our measure to de-risk against the career attacks and to try to monetize the platform, hopefully actually create some marketing dollars so I can amplify this message. That would be great. And then there's Rumble as like the third priority. If everything goes down, if they nuke the Instagram, they nuke the YouTube, Substack is still very small. It's less than 50 followers. So we really need attention there. Rumble, we're somewhere around like 700 or 800 followers. Rumble just doesn't get the traffic. It sucks. It is the way it is. You know, if they do fully clamp down on YouTube, which they just clamped down on Instagram last week, there was a huge ban wave of groypers, people who are clipping Nick Fuentes's content. They shut it down hard, and I'm pretty anxious that they're going to nuke my account over there. But if they do that, then we'll be forced to start contributing to Rumble more. It's not that I don't already. Every vlog I publish, I also publish on Rumble. But there's just not that much organic traffic on Rumble. So it is what it is. You just lay these bricks one brick at a time. All right, you guys, let's wrap this up. It's 5:10 here. Until next time, love you guys. Take care of yourselves. Christ is King.